Hello you guys, and welcome to Mr. and Mrs. Social Studies. I'm Sarah.
I'm Jake.
And we are so excited to share today's video, which is
the best
and
the worst parts of teaching.
So,
yay!
So today we're going to share a few details that for us, based on each teaching for 3 years, what some of the best parts have been for us as well as some of the worst parts, just in full transparency, so that if you are thinking about going into the profession, you can decide maybe how these sound. Again, these are just based on our own experience. If you are a fellow teacher and have different things to add that are maybe your favorite parts or least favorite parts of the job, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. All right, so let's get started. First with the best parts of teaching.
Number 1, working with kids. But in all honesty though, how many other jobs do you get to go into where you get to work with a bunch of either teenagers or tweens or little younger people? And like that's what you do. Like you forget associating with adults. You only do that for part of the time. And kids, they keep you alive. They keep you honest. They keep you on your toes. Nothing can ever get monotonous when you have 20 something different little personalities or slightly bigger than little personalities in the room, all vying for your attention. It can be great, but one of the worst parts about teaching is that you basically work with kids. And what I mean about this part here is that while it's awesome because of all the crazy stories and awesome things that happen, it can be frustrating sometimes that your colleagues are your students. And I mean by that is not that you literally are treating each other the same way, but that most of your day-to-day interaction at work is going to come with people who are younger than you, who are not as mature as you. Sometimes it can be difficult when you have, especially those conflicts, those disciplinary situations. It can get draining sometimes, especially if you have like a rough week with many of that.
Absolutely. Working with kids is a blast, but they don't have the same maturity level sometimes, and there can be frustrations that come from that. For me, I feel like I see it as more of a privilege, but it definitely depends on the individual. Another really great benefit that is one of my favorites, you are not sentenced to sit in a cubicle. You can move around the room, you're on your feet, you're not just sitting there all day slowly killing yourself because of how bad sitting is for us. So I love that I'm not just seated all day at a cubicle or anything like that. That sounds so boring. I'm always up around the room, and before you know it, you've been standing up nearly the whole day, and you didn't even really notice it.
And you don't have to stare at a computer screen all day, which I know for some people, me included, really stinks.
But you do some of that afterwards when you're planning for the next day. I think one of my other favorite parts about teaching is that there's really an emphasis on learning. As a teacher, I get to continue learning all the time, whether it's I'm learning from my students, I'm learning to prepare for new things I'm doing in my classroom. I grow more as a person because I'm a teacher, because I continue learning these new skills.
Professional development. Another great thing about this job is that people actually look up to you, whether you notice it or not, actually. Like I got a note at the end of this past year from a former student. No idea that I had impacted her life as much as I did. And it's really cool in all seriousness when you get to have those moments where you realize or you're told just how much you actually meant for someone. Because most of the times teaching is a thankless profession. You never know what the final product is of your labor because most of the kids you probably are not going to hear from again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another really great part too is that teaching really helps focus on reflection. So when you are teaching, there's a lot of self-reflection based on how can I improve myself as a teacher? What are the best ways to help my students learn in the classroom? There's a lot of reflection that goes on, and I feel like you get to know yourself pretty well. I feel like over the last 3 years, I've grown a lot as a teacher. I believe that a lot of that I can think from taking the time to self-reflect.
The other thing about teaching, stories. Yeah, so if you ever had a problem, trying to win over your family's attention at family gatherings, well, teaching's the perfect job for you because you are going to come away with a bunch of crazy stories that are going to just blow people's minds. Extracurricular activities. This is another great part of teaching because I found that this is the time where you can actually get to know kids a lot better than you can just as far as their classroom selves. And I know I've done a school play, I've done like a gaming club.
I've coached track.
It's really actually cool to get to know the kids on another level when you direct extracurricular activities. They can be time consuming, don't get us wrong, but they have the potential to be some of the most rewarding experiences that you have as a teacher, and they're not even inside the classroom.
Absolutely. Another benefit too is that you maybe have a more informal dress code than working at some other places. It depends on the job, obviously, because there's a big range, but for me, I found it's a little bit more relaxed than I suppose it would be working in a more formal office.
Yeah.
And finally, one thing we have to mention too is the schedule and hours are really nice. It was interesting listening to some of my friends and their schedules for when they're working. My hours are so nice. And even though maybe there are some drawbacks in terms of not getting as much pay as certain other jobs, also not being expected to work as many hours, at least during the school day in the building. We definitely put in plenty of hours. I don't want to admit how many nights I would be up till like 2 a.m. working on something for the next day of my class. But the idea is that you can count on being home for your evenings, for your weekends, getting holidays off, and getting a summer break. Those I know are maybe one of the more obvious benefits to some, but it is really nice, and I genuinely do think we put in enough hours, especially if you're working from home. We put in enough hours to kind of round out that year, but I think that is one of the benefits, just the consistency in your hours. You're not going to have shifts where you're working overnight or on weekends or things like that, with the exception of maybe very few events that happen at your school that sometimes you sign up for.
Cons to the job, hence the thumbs down that I was representing. I'm not a conny person, but I was the con in our picture. Pressure from standardized testing. As social studies teachers, we generally luck out on that, but we still feel it too, in that a lot of school districts, I mean, have expectations for testing. There's part testing that you have to do, and then we have to do progress monitoring testing. And then I know the school district I worked at, we had to do student growth testing, test them at the beginning of the year, test them at the end of the year. Then you have to give them unit tests for your class, and then they receive tests from all the other classes. It's just a lot of tests.
And there can be a lot of pressure, because in some situations, you keeping your job depends upon these tests. So that can definitely be a challenge.
Yeah, so I haven't met a teacher that loves standardized testing. So if you're
out there, let us know.
Or maybe not, because then we'll feel bad about ourselves.
Maybe they can tell us their secrets.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Another drawback is the amount of paper clutter and digital clutter that can come up when you are collecting all these assignments and having to grade them. Those take time, and especially if you're someone who's a little bit disorganized like me, it can be tough to kind of keep things together.
Yeah, you really have to try to stay organized as you're going along. Don't wait to have it build up. Even like at the end of the week, I found you gotta like just take care of it day by day to save yourself that headache, especially at the end of the year when you're trying to like organize everything. Something that I think we both found, I know personally I found a lot of this, is that it's inevitable that besides dealing with students, you also have to deal with their parents. While, I mean, I have met, don't get me wrong, some wonderful, awesome parents who've been very supportive of me. But at the same time, I've also interacted with parents who, you know, I anticipate when I'm a parent, we'll all kind of like suffer from this a little bit, but my kid is, you know, kind of perfect effect, and therefore anything that they do, it's not really their fault, it's kind of yours. If they misbehave, what are you doing to fix the problem? Not ever really looking at what is the kid doing wrong and what's their share in the whole mess, because it takes two to tango, so to speak. So I know I've dealt with a few parents where it's been, you know, just kind of like going in circles. Well, when are you going to admit that there is a role that they are playing? I'll admit my faults in this if there are any, but where is the role that the child needs to play in improving and taking initiative in their own education and bettering it? It can't all just be on the teacher.
And it's tough because obviously you want that support there to have the most effective experience possible, and sometimes that support isn't there.
You wish you had more time to eat lunch. I know there's some jobs that don't even give you really any time probably, but you're lucky to get 30 minutes. 30 minutes is luxury for lunch as a teacher.
And even there, sometimes you're still like finishing something up before or going back to prepare something. Those are just a few of our ideas here for some of the best and worst parts about teaching. What did we miss? Let us know down below. And if you enjoy teacher-related content, we'd love to have you here as a subscriber at Mr. and Mrs. Social Studies. We'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Bye.